Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be a quick character tier list for Genshin Impact, which will take into account a couple things. First of all, this is right after Klee Banner has been released, a little bit after. Secondly, we are going to only take into account 4-star max constellations if they have been rated up in the Klee Banner or the Venti Banner. Due to that, this does not mean that your character of choice is not usable. As you can see, there's a D tier there, right there, up there. It still means you can use the character. The character is fine. Genshin Impact is unlike any other game. All of these characters are usable. Every single one of them. All of them. So you can use a character if you really want to. It does not matter what I'm saying. Tier lists are tier lists, but the reason why I make this is just so you can see kind of like, okay, decide between your favorites, which you should build better than others, so on and so forth. So first of all, obviously, Diluc SS tier. His damage, off the charts, okay? It's ridiculous. His E is a 3-hit combo, which you can stagger along with squeezing in normal attacks with a very short cooldown, which have a really high percentage of attack per hit. And his basic attacks do a lot, percentage-wise, attack percent-wise, just like all greatswords do. But the fact that he can squeeze them in between E's and a very short cooldown, plus pyro damage, which is one of the strongest elements-wise for element combinations, insane. Secondly, his ult, Diluc gets the fire on his blade just like Qing does after his ult. Really easy to get, okay? Every single hit of the E gives you elemental particles, which is unusual. So elemental particles feed back into your elemental burst gauge, get it faster. It's insane. Why? It sweeps enemies along with them, even if it's just the edge of the Phoenix Wing. Do a shit ton of damage. Another thing is if it's inside a Venti ult, it'll get sucked into the Venti ult and stay within, doing damage to everything inside. Okay, now besides that, he also has an incredible passive letting you get 15% of your ore materials back when you craft a claymore type weapon, which is really good, especially if you decide to build him or any of these other great claymore users. Next up, we have because your E, Keqing, SS tier. Electro is one of the strongest units along with fire in terms of elemental combinations. Electro along with fire causes overload. Electro plus ice causes superconduct. Superconduct is really strong. Overload causes a damage AoE. Superconduct just deals cryo AoE damage and reduces the target's defense, which is nuts. So I've already established that Electro and Fire are both really strong because of the Superconduct and Overload. Keqing is a fast, nimble, hard-hitting attacker. She is a one-handed sword user, which means her attacks are very fast, and the craziest thing about her is the fact that after she uses her E and presses E again, or for PS4 users, R2, and then R2 again, the first hit of R2 is when you throw it, the stiletto, the lightning stiletto, does damage, and then when you press it again, do damage when you pop up, and slash, which also does damage. Both can trigger Overload and Superconduct. Immediately after you press E the second time, or R2, your sword becomes induced by Electro, meaning all your normal attacks for the next few seconds are going to be Electro damage-based attacks. One more thing, damage comes greatly from elemental reactions, and having an easy way to trigger elemental reactions will decisively change how much damage a character does. So you will notice that my character choices are also going to be based around elemental reactions, how easy they're able to do elemental reactions. Next up, we have Venti, someone who's so easily capable of elemental reactions that it's inside of his kit to add an element to the reaction known as Swirl. So whenever he ults, his elemental burst comes out, and if another element touches that ultimate, it will then make that ultimate into a swirl of Anemo and that other thing. So let's say, for example, you use Diluc ult, or you use Diluc ult and then you attack the enemy as he goes into the Venti ult and he gets sucked in while he's burning. The burn will trigger the effect that Venti has and cause a fireball of a Venti ult. You can literally see Venti with every single other element that will ever come out into it, and it will turn into that color and be constantly there. The crazy thing about it is, since you're already in there and you have this additional element into it, you can then force feed it several other elemental reactions. That makes the Anemo user known as Venti very good, along with his E for exploration, and the damage that his E has is great. Now, the next character on this list will be Barbara, S tier. She's easily accessible. Let's say you have her at 6 constellation. She is now a free full resurrection on Abyss or wherever you may use her, which is a lifesaver. Sometimes you're in Abyss, you need heals, you don't have Barbara ult to burst heal right away, but you can go in, go ham, do a lot of damage, go down swinging, and then once per every 15 minutes, get your resurrection up, your spick and span, you're good to go, you do more damage. And Barbara S tier, why is she not SS tier? Because there's one huge downside, and that is the wet effect. Like I said before, elemental effects in this game are crucial in terms of damage, and now I'm saying in terms of effects. When you get something wet, Pega, you can get them frozen if you add ice. The thing is, Barbara E, which is what you use to heal, makes you very vulnerable to ice, cause you to freeze. It's terrible. You don't want that. But since she's such a great healer, sometimes you can just overlook that. Not everyone has Mona, so you can use Barbara pretty easily for bosses like the Pyro Regis Vine, you know, or like the Fire Abyss mages or the fire mages that you see out in the overworld. She breaks their shields so fast. She has great utility. She's amazing. Next character. Jean. S tier. Why do I think she's S tier, not SS tier? I'll tell you why. Her heal is why a lot of people use her, and it really goes on the state of mind of, do you see her as a main physical DPS that can heal, or as a main healer that can do DPS? So depending on what you want, you'll get different things. I will put her ahead of Barbara in terms of heals, just because her burst also does damage, but she's an SS tier if you think about her as a physical attacker, since her normals have a high percentage per hit and can absolutely smack people. It's ridiculous what I've seen with Jean in terms of physical attack. And when you build them for physical attack, sometimes you don't have as much attack percentage. You do have attack percentage, but then you have like physical attack percentage multipliers instead of like a healing bonus multiplier. You might not heal as much right away in one burst. That's totally fine. It's not the biggest deal in the world, because when it's in Abyss, they're good. You use it on things you're going to kill, so you stay in that circle and you're good. But in co-op, sometimes she's not going to be healing everyone except for the initial heal, because people are going to be doing their own things. Maybe in like the co-op event that just happened, people might be spread out. But usually does full heal, so that's why she's still SS tier or S tier. I'm just going to put her in the S tier to be safe. Don't worry about the placement, like I told you before, which means use everyone. Use whoever you want. Let's keep it going. Next up, we got one of the first characters I ever got in this game, Beidou. Or Beidou. I'm going to put her in the A category. She is very good in terms of her normals do a lot of damage because she's a great sword, so it has a lot of attack percentage per hit. You might see some spanky numbers here and there, but the biggest issue is that her E is great, and with a high enough crit rate and crit damage, you can see some absolutely ridiculous numbers. But the fact that you have to build her in that way to see anything remarkable is kind of sad. Her ult, though, is so good, I would be tempted just to put her at the end of S tier. I might, after I finish the whole tier list, but just to tell you what it does is an ult comes out, and then after you switch, or if you stay, each normal attack will generate electro damage, which can then cause elemental reactions. I've told you before, elemental reactions, cause of DPS, electro being one of the best. Let's say you do Luke ult, switch to Beidou ult, switch to Luke, you still got the fire sword out. All of your hits are going to be doing fire and electro damage, which means you'll be overloading every single person you hit. It doesn't apply to the weapon itself, it applies to the shield around you, which then shocks the people you attack, which go off her base attack, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, causing overload or superconduct if you're using someone like Chi-Chi with has her E, or Kaeya with his ult out, you know, blah, blah, blah. You could do whatever. Next up, we got Fischl, the Fish. Fish is S tier simply because Oz is amazing. Oz will carry you. Oz will do a lot of damage, and just like Beidou does with their ult, will constantly be doing electro damage at a target. Elemental combinations are the way for more damage. So why is she so good? Her damage output, along with the elemental reactions, makes her amazing. That and the fact that she is an electro bow user means you can take down certain enemies with shields that are weak to electro very easily, which is charging a bow and arrow and then releasing. Next character, we got Kaeya, A tier. Why is he A tier and not lower? Some people don't like him, some people like him. His ult is amazing. You'll start seeing a trend where some characters might not be the greatest on paper or damage-wise, but their ults are so good that it just makes them that much more viable in terms of like investing in them, so that ult is better and does more damage and elemental combination damage with other elements. Kaeya's ult is an orbital, which means it goes around your character, spins, and stays and does damage and causes the elemental reaction. Just like someone else on the list Xiangling, which I will then put in SS here. I'll tell you that in a bit. Kaeya's ultimate elemental burst, whatever you want to call it, is not quite on the level of Xiangling, simply because you can't easily get access to more of Kaeya's constellation, and his constellation doesn't really revolve too much around extending the time or damage of his elemental burst. But Xiangling does have some crazy things around her elemental burst. Okay, so now that we're moving on to Xiangling, which we kind of already did, let me step back a bit first and finish off with Kaeya saying that since Ice is so good with Electro, Superconduct is nothing to be scoffed at. Kaeya is one of the easiest forms for everyone to get Superconduct with just a lot of damage because it's free to play, everyone has them, and there's always a way for you to build his ult and use it in Abyss with an Electro unit. Official, Chang, you name it. Beidou ult, and then switch into Kaeya, uses ult, and then switch to someone that attacks fast. It doesn't matter. You have both of them going off. Superconduct everywhere, insane amount of damage. All right, next, Xiangling. Xiangling's ult will carry you. It will absolutely carry you. And now, since we're going back into the fact that Xiangling has the benefit of being right up in the Venti banner, a max constellation Xiangling is a thing of beauty. It does so much damage, it stays up for so long, and there's so many things here and there that make it so much better. How? It extends the duration, it does so much more damage, Goba does damage, and it extends the further reach of Goba. There's another thing that when Goba runs out, it'll drop a pepper, which you then use to gain a 10% attack boost for the next 10 seconds. You can then ult, you can then use Goba again, since it'll stack on itself. You can use your normals, whatever, or you can switch, pick it up on someone else, DPS down while you have your Xiangling ult, and it'll just be insane. Let's just think about it this way. Xiangling, one of the ultimate DPS supports in the game. Next up, we got Mona. Mona, I'm gonna put into SS tier as well. So the reason why I'm putting Mona in SS tier is simply because her elemental burst is so strong. All I gotta do to convince you that she's this good is two things. Her exploration makes her a lot of fun. Sure, sprinting might not be the most optimal way to play as a character. You rather double dash, spam the dash button, and then you'll get more bang for your buck, and you'll be able to go longer and faster. But it's so much fun to sprint and run around and do stuff that it's undeniably, unequivocally one of the strangest, coolest ways to travel in this game. And the fact that you can basically walk on water, which is just sprinting on water, is ridiculous. She's really cool. Her ult massively multiplies the amount of damage you can do, and that along with Venti or the way to group everyone together like Sucrose or Jean holding E makes her insane. That's enough. Just look her up, just Google Mona Genshin Impact and read her elemental burst skill, and then come back. Next character, I'm gonna go with someone that you might not think is this good. Amber, A tier. Why A tier? Why not B tier? Why not C tier? 2 words: the Abyss. I used Amber for the double fire unit buff, with her only being level 10 still from when I used her at the beginning of the game, and I never used her again. Why did I stop using her? Her E, trash. Her Q, trash. Her damage output, I don't know. I stopped using her too early. But guess what? She is a bow user, which means every time she charges up her shot, it's a fire ready to go wherever you want it to go. So when you're starting to do Abyss, there will be some floors where cryo mages just pop up, and cryo mages are usually paired with water mages, which then get you all sorts of fucked up because they freeze you or they bubble you. It's annoying, it's insane, it's crazy. But with bow units in specific, or like someone with Diluc, which not everyone has the privilege to have, if you only have Xiangling built, because Xiangling's insane, the one thing Xiangling's weak is breaking ice shields. Goba, he sucks at breaking ice shields because they teleport. You don't have the time to go and push him to the location of the next ice shield. Even with full constellation Xiangling, she doesn't have a way to activate fire without her ult or without Goba, unless you do the last hit of her normal, which will then apply a status, which will then blow up and do fire damage. But to my knowledge, it doesn't work on shields, so it's kind of worthless. Amber is your way to go. Melt shields. You can go wherever they teleport, just dodge whenever they throw their little icicle on the ground, and you're good. Break the shield, amazing. Amber is worth your time to look at, even if you don't decide to invest into her. Just throw into your team with Xiangling or Diluc and just watch them go. Next up, we got Bennett. Bennett is great. Bennett looks up to Diluc. He wants to be Diluc with his E. Sadly, can't quite get there, but what can he do? He can ult, which is a passive for healing if you're under a certain threshold of HP, or attack buff for everyone in the circle, which is obviously amazing. You want as much damage as possible, and since he's a fire unit, you can stack him for the double fire. Great. He is simply great, and he can also melt shields because he has an E. which will hit, you know, blah, blah, blah. He's great. He's a good support. I recommend him. He's really, really good. I've seen some crazy ass numbers with his buffs, some crazy ass things just simply based on the fact that he's a fire unit, which will allow your Diluc to do even more damage with his ult and with the double fire. Next up, we got Lisa. I'm sorry, Lisa. Having to hold your E to do any sort of resemblance of damage, it's just not the greatest. The only saving grace that she has is that she's an electro mage, so if there's already fire on the field or ice on the field or whatever, her normals will proc overload or superconduct, which is really strong like I've told you, so she's not completely useless. She's still there. She's still free to play. If you don't have any other electro units, you can still use her. She's still fine. She's just not the greatest. She just doesn't do enough damage. It is what it is, you know. I'm not trying to put her down. I want to love her more. You know, I'm not trying to shit on her. It's just, it is what it is. Next up, we got Razor, S tier. He's really strong. He's main DPS for a lot of people. It really can go, like, they're not really ordered here. He's amazing. He's not quite SS tier. He'll be SS tier if he has full constellation, but look, we're just talking about the full constellation for the characters that have full constellation, like Fish, Xiangling, Barbara, Noelle, Sucrose, and Xingqiu. Anyway, Razor, great main DPS. Electro, his ult's amazing. JoJo stand. He's super cool. His Japanese voice actor is voiced by Meruem from Hunter x Hunter. Several other notable anime characters. I just don't want to get too much into it. It's gonna go on for too long. But Razor is amazing. Has a great AoE with his E. You can do E ult. You get your E back. E again. You do a fuck ton of damage. You're good to go. Next up, we got Chi-Chi. SS tier. She is simply the best healer right now in terms of longevity and maybe not burst, but her passive on Ascension 4, allowing you to get your ult off on an enemy every dozen seconds or so, is amazing. You're basically cheating out an ult without having to ult. And then whoever needs to get healed, just turn into that character, or in co-op, that character can then attack that enemy and then start getting healed back. You don't have to worry about dying because you're going to be doing so much healing to yourself because of Chi-Chi. Another thing is that she's ice and her E procs a healing thing around you, and it doesn't cause you to have that on you directly. It's just hitting things and causing them to freeze. So let's say you were wet and you pressed E, it wouldn't cause you to freeze, unlike Barbara, which wets you as soon as you press E. So anyway, that thing procs ice element whenever it procs. Does a little flick every now and again, and those flicks heal you and also do ice damage in front of you. She's great, she's amazing, she's cool, and her passive is insane. That lets you see the exclusive materials that you can gather in Liyue, which is undeniably amazing. It's so good. You can just walk around and do stuff and find things that are only for Liyue instead of just a bunch of sweet flowers, which are still good, but not as great as like Core Lapis or whatever. All right, next up we got Sucrose. Dude, you have to check out Sucrose. She is insanely strong. She is so good. She has to be SS tier. She's one of the first mages that really make you think, if you use her, what a character. She is like a different type of Venti in the form that her ult also sucks things in, and it has this huge effect, and it causes more damage, and she has a way to pass you elemental mastery to characters. Her E gets up to 2 charges. There's her whole constellation all kind of forms around the fact to use E more, and Q, which is her elemental skill, and her elemental burst. It just all synergizes so perfectly well. You do heaps and heaps of damage. You can take out heaps and heaps of enemies together without really having to rely on your elemental burst that much, but even then you'll still be able to. And the best thing about her is you can use her on the other side of Abyss with Venti. Therefore you will have 2 AoE Anemo damage dealers, which will do swirl and be gathering enemies together for you to enjoy massive kills. Cannot go understated how good crowd control is in this game, especially because of Abyss. Next character, we got Chongyun. Chongyun is undeniably an underdog in this game right now. Not many people know about him. Not many people care about him. He's great. He hits a popsicle. He does a lot of damage. He is the Razor of Ice. If that doesn't really convince you to try him out, look up videos of him. He is nuts. He's really strong. He's really, really good. And the fact that he procs ice, which is really a very strong element that gets overshadowed by fire and electro, but it's just so good, especially with electro. It's so ridiculous. He's really strong. He's a great sword user, so his normals are really cool and really strong. He's great. He's amazing. You should try him out. He's really good. Next up, we got Noelle. Now, Noelle, one of 2 ways. You can build her strictly as a healer, or more of an attacker that happens to heal, or maybe a little bit of both. As simply a healer, she's probably A, somewhere in between A and S, at the end of S. As an attacker, as a Geo attacker that happens to heal and have a really good stuff, like with her full constellation, which makes her defense %, which also makes her healing better and her attacking better. Boost her attack by 50% of her defense, which makes her have some insane damage numbers. She'll be definitely S tier, undeniably S tier. She's really good, especially now that you have access to constellation. Before, without having the first constellation, which was really hard to acquire, her healing was unremarkable at best, because sometimes you wouldn't get the 50% chance proc, you just wouldn't heal, you're dead. But now that you almost guarantee get yourself one Noelle dupe, she's good as a healer, and especially when you get her full max constellationed out, she's great. She's insane. Her 50% defense into attack bonus is incredible. She does heaps of damage. Next up, we got the Travelers. So right now, the Travelers, I would say, are, let's say the main character is Geo, the male main character, and then the female is an emo, just based off the fact that he's kind of got some Geo type of thing, and this looks more like Ice, but let's just say it's an emo. So for Geo, great for puzzles. That's about it. It's fine. He's solid. He's chill, but you can't deny that puzzles in this game, this sort of exploration game, you just can't ignore it. It's too much of a thing in this game to deny passives or stuff that lets you traverse the world easily, like a Ching's E, Venti's E, or things that help you like Chi-Chi's passive or Klee's passive. On the other hand, a Nemo main character, so good for Abyss. It's like a cheap, easy to access Sucrose ult or Venti ult with the Nemo ult that gathers everyone together and does swirl damage, and then you can do whatever you want inside of it, but it's a good alternative. Would it be considered really S tier among all these characters looking at him? Not really. Let's just say they're at the end of S tier because that ult is just really strong. In a certain floor on Abyss, one of the early floors, 3 or 4, I can't remember, might be both, you can actually ult them off the map. They just die. Next up, we got Ningguang. Now, Ningguang is she's in a very weird position. She's Geo, which Geo isn't the greatest elements right now, but she's a mage. Mages are typically either really strong or really bad. Right now, like, with Lisa or Mona, or Barbara being kind of like a healing mage, so it's kind of different. She's really strong. Her Q is insane, especially because it stacks with her E, and you can put her E, which blocks projectiles. But if you have your elemental burst and your E there, the E will actually shoot out things as well as your Q. She does a lot of damage. I've seen some crazy numbers of damage, but the thing is, she's really hard to get right now, obviously, so you won't have multiple constellations. You'll just have the one, or maybe one more, whatever. Point is, we're just looking at this as all 0 constellations, or multiple, or if not all, if they're the rate ups. Ningguang is great. Next up, we got Xingqiu. Xingqiu is in a really weird spot. His ult his constellation really just tends to drag him on into his ult. So since he's on the rate up right now, when he has his ult up, he smacks. He's pretty good. He doesn't have that high of a base attack damage, and he might not have the biggest numbers in the world, and he might not have the best element in the world, but still, it's pretty badass having these swords around you. He's really fun. So I'll put him in the top of A tier just because of how fun he is, and the fact that since characters with constellations right now, multiple constellations, they just have an advantage that the other ones don't, because multiple constellations make some characters ridiculous, and the fact that you have multiple swords and then the one extra sword with his first constellation and then his ult getting really strong, the more constellations you put into it, he gets pretty good. And if he's one of your only characters that you have and you somehow get him to max constellation, you don't get many other characters that well. And his passive, which should not be ignored, is amazing. You know what? Just because of that passive, I'm going to put him back in S tier. The ability to get crafting materials back based on the crafting that you do, insane. Just like with Sucrose. They're both really good passives. Undeniable. It will save you some grinding. It's always saving you some resin is always important. Last up, we got Klee. Now, Klee, for me, is in a weird position because I particularly do not care for her playstyle, her left clicking, her normal attacks. It's just not that fun to me. I don't find it very appealing. You can test her out yourself. I recommend you testing out a character if you're going to pull for them. But the matter of fact is, she does a lot of numbers. So in between both of those, I'm going to put her at the top of S tier, just because her Mondstadt passive is just so good, as well as her damage numbers being so high, but just because of my opinion that you will either love her or hate her. You either want to see big numbers only and that's why you like them, or you like to bomb toss, or you prefer a more, let's say, customizable approach of attacking than just lobbing bombs. Essentially, what you're literally all you're doing is basically lobbing bombs, different shapes of bombs, different forms of bombs. It's just you have to try her out to really like her yourself. But I will say she does a lot of damage. Her passive's really good, and since she's a fire unit, fire units are great as well as electro units. Anyway, thank you for watching. Remember, tier lists don't really matter. This is just an opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. Do whatever you want with it. This is just kind of to see, look, almost everyone is above B, C, or annoying tier. Interesting. It's almost like this game can be used with almost every character. That's right, because you can. There's just so many different ways to use these characters with your artifacts and the way you build them and the elemental mastery combos. It's just the fact that fire and electro units have it easier. Crowd control or support users have it easier. You know, it's just so many different factors. Use who you want to use. If you want to use Lisa, go ahead. What's stopping you? No one's going to get to look at Lisa as much as you do. So, and that's a benefit. Go ahead, use her. Then you get to see her. People are going to be missing out. They can't see her as much as you can because you decided to build her. But yeah, thank you for watching. Hope to see you again. Bye-bye.